The moment they decided to cut me off financially was the exact moment they discovered who had been keeping them afloat all along, and watching their faces crumble was worth every penny I'd ever spent on them. The engagement party at the Westchester Country Club was supposed to be perfect. My sister Tiffany had planned every detail down to the exact shade of pink for the rose petals scattered on the tables. The ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers that caught the late afternoon sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Servers in crisp white uniforms glided between clusters of guests, carrying trays of champagne and canapés that cost more per bite than most people spend on entire meals. I stood near the terrace doors, nursing the same glass of champagne I'd picked up an hour ago, watching my family work the room. Tiffany, radiant in her designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, was showing off her engagement ring to anyone who would look. The diamond was so large it seemed to have its own gravitational pull. Her fiancé Michael stood beside her, his perfectly styled hair and $1,000 shoes screaming new money, trying to look like old wealth. My cousin Brenda held court near the bar, regaling a group of Tiffany's friends with stories about her latest business venture, something involving sustainable fashion that I knew was hemorrhaging money faster than she could borrow it from banks. Her husband Richard nodded along, adding details about their recent trip to Milan for Fashion Week, carefully omitting that they'd stayed in a hotel I'd paid for. Uncle Arthur was deep in conversation with some hedge fund types, his booming voice carrying across the room as he described his latest real estate development project. The same project that had been stalled for 6 months due to lack of funding, though he'd never admit it publicly. Aunt Estelle stood beside him, dripping in jewelry that I knew came from a shopping spree she couldn't afford, but did anyway, because keeping up appearances was more important than paying bills. They all looked so successful, so accomplished, so utterly convinced of their own superiority. And there I was, Bonnie the disappointment, Bonnie the underachiever, Bonnie, who worked as a freelance graphic designer and lived in a modest apartment in Queens while they all resided in their suburban mansions and Manhattan penthouses. My phone vibrated in my clutch. A notification from Chase Private Banking. Monthly automated transfers completed. Total disbursed. $187,000. 26 recipient accounts. I glanced at it and slipped the phone back into my purse. Just another month of keeping my family's lifestyle afloat while they sneered at my supposed lack of ambition. Tiffany clinked her champagne flute with a silver spoon, drawing everyone's attention. She stood in the center of the room, Michael's arm around her waist, looking every inch the princess she'd always believed herself to be. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate our engagement," she began, her voice carrying that particular tone of false modesty that wealthy people perfect. "Michael and I are so blessed to have such successful, ambitious people in our lives." Her eyes swept the room and paused on me for a moment, her smile tightening almost imperceptibly. "Before we toast," she continued, "I wanted to address something important. Family is everything to us, and we believe in supporting each other through thick and thin. But we also believe in accountability and personal responsibility." I felt my stomach tighten. Something about her tone, the way Brenda and Richard were nodding along, the way Uncle Arthur was looking at me with barely concealed disdain, told me this was not going to end well. "Which is why," Tiffany continued, her voice taking on a harder edge, "we've made a difficult family decision. Bonnie, would you come here, please?" Every eye in the room turned to me. I set down my champagne glass and walked forward, my simple black dress a stark contrast to the designer gowns surrounding me. The crowd parted, creating a path that felt more like a gauntlet. When I reached the center of the room, Tiffany turned to face me fully. "Bonnie, we love you, but your lack of ambition and constant need for financial support has become a burden on this family." I heard several gasps from the crowd. My cheeks burned, but I kept my expression neutral. Let her continue, I thought. Let them all show their true colors. Brenda stepped forward, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We've all tried to help you, honey, but at some point, you need to learn to stand on your own feet. It's not fair to expect the successful members of the family to keep propping you up." "Exactly," Richard chimed in. "We all work hard for what we have. Maybe if you applied yourself more instead of doodling logos for coffee shops, you wouldn't need handouts." Uncle Arthur cleared his throat. "The family has been more than patient, Bonnie, but resources should go to those who know how to multiply them, not those who simply consume them." I stood there, surrounded by vultures, dressed in designer clothing, and felt an odd sense of calm wash over me. They had no idea what they were doing. No idea at all. Tiffany raised her glass. "So, effective immediately, we're cutting off all financial support. It's time for you to learn what real independence means." The room erupted in polite applause, the kind that happens when people are uncomfortable but feel obligated to show support. Some of Tiffany's friends were whispering behind their hands, clearly enjoying the drama. Michael was smirking, probably thinking about how this cleared one more poor relation out of their perfect life. My phone buzzed again. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. Another Chase notification. "Automated transfers canceled per your request. Monthly total, $187,000. I looked up at Tiffany. then at the rest of my family, and smiled. A genuine smile, the first one I'd had all evening. "You're absolutely right," I said, my voice calm and clear. "Financial independence is important. I completely agree with your decision." Tiffany blinked, clearly not expecting such easy acceptance. Before she could respond, phones started buzzing throughout the room. Not just one or two, but dozens. Brenda pulled hers out first, her face going white as she stared at the screen. Richard grabbed his hands starting to shake. Uncle Arthur's phone rang, and he answered it with a sharp, "What do you mean the payment was declined?" I pulled out my own phone and dialed a number. When the call connected, I put it on speaker. "Good evening, Miss Blackwood," came the professional voice of Patricia, my wealth manager at Chase Private Banking. "I see you've canceled the recurring transfers. Would you like me to explain the account structure to your family?" The room went completely silent except for the sound of Patricia's voice. "Of course," I said, keeping my eyes on Tiffany's increasingly pale face. "Please go ahead." "Certainly, Miss Blackwood has been maintaining automated monthly transfers to 26 individual accounts, totaling approximately $187,000 per month. These transfers have covered mortgage payments, car loans, credit card bills, private school tuitions, country club memberships, and general living expenses for the designated recipients." Tiffany's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. The sound echoed through the silent room. Patricia continued. "Additionally, Miss Blackwood holds the primary position on several real estate holdings, with a combined value of approximately $47 million, including the Westchester property we're currently processing, 3 Manhattan apartments, and a commercial building in Brooklyn." "That's impossible," Tiffany whispered. She's a graphic designer." I smiled wider. "I am a graphic designer. I'm also the founder and CEO of Blackwood Digital, a company that handles design and branding for 3 Fortune 500 companies. I own 4 patents for design software that Adobe licenses from me. And I'm the silent partner in 7 successful startups, including that sustainable fashion brand you're always bragging about, Brenda." Brenda's legs gave out. She collapsed into a chair, her face the color of ash. "The investor who saved my company? That was you?" "Every penny," I confirmed. "Just like the down payment on your house, Uncle Arthur, and the bailout of your hedge fund after that disastrous bet on oil futures, Richard." "And Tiffany, that beautiful engagement ring you're wearing? When Michael's credit was declined at Tiffany's, who do you think covered it?" Michael's face went from red to purple. "You're lying." Patricia's voice came through the speaker again. "Mr. Henderson, your credit application was indeed declined. Miss Blackwood authorized a purchase of $127,000 for a 4.7-carat diamond ring 3 months ago. The transaction is on record." The room exploded into chaos. Uncle Arthur was shouting into his phone about mortgage payments. Brenda was crying, mascara streaming down her face. Richard was frantically checking his banking app, watching account after account show insufficient funds. Several of Tiffany's guests were recording everything on their phones, and I knew this would be all over social media within hours. Tiffany grabbed my arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my skin. "You can't do this. We're family." I gently removed her hand. Family doesn't humiliate each other in front of 200 guests. Family doesn't spend years mocking someone's career while secretly living off their success. Family doesn't treat someone like a parasite while being the actual parasites themselves. "Please," she begged, all pretense of superiority gone. "The wedding venue requires payment by Monday. The apartment, Michael and I just signed the lease." "Then I suggest Michael starts looking for a better job," I said. "Or maybe you could try working for once in your life." Aunt Estelle pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face. "Bonnie, please. We didn't know. If we had known." "You would have treated me with basic respect?" I finished. "You would have acknowledged my success instead of constantly belittling me?" "No, Aunt Estelle. You would have just been more careful about insulting me to my face while still doing it behind my back." I picked up my clutch and started walking toward the door. The crowd parted again, but this time it felt like a victory march rather than a walk of shame. "Wait!" Uncle Arthur's voice boomed across the room. "You can't just leave. My development project, without the monthly payment, I'll lose everything." I paused at the doorway and looked back. "Then I guess you'll have to learn what real independence means, Uncle Arthur. Isn't that what you all wanted?" "This is illegal!" Richard shouted. "We'll sue!" "Go ahead," I said. "My lawyer would love to show the court how you've been living off my money while publicly humiliating me for being financially dependent. I'm sure that will go well for you." I walked out of the country club, leaving behind the sound of arguments, tears, and shattering illusions. The valet brought my car around, a modest Honda Civic that they'd all mocked countless times, not knowing I could afford a fleet of Ferraris but chose not to because I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. As I drove away, my phone exploded with messages, Tiffany begging me to reconsider, Brenda offering me a full partnership in her company if I'd just restore the funding, Uncle Arthur threatening legal action one minute and groveling the next. I turned off my phone and drove in blessed silence. The next morning, I woke up in my apartment in Queens, the one they all thought was beneath them. What they didn't know was that I owned the entire building, all 12 units, and the 2 buildings on either side. My modest apartment was actually 3 units combined, renovated to my exact specifications, with a view of the Manhattan skyline that real estate agents would kill for. I made myself coffee in my kitchen that cost more to renovate than most people's entire homes, though you'd never know it from the outside. That was the difference between me and my family. They needed everyone to see their success. I just needed to live it. By noon, the calls had started coming from mutual acquaintances. News of the engagement party disaster had spread through Westchester's social circles like wildfire. Several people reached out to say they'd always suspected something was off about my family's treatment of me. Others wanted to know if I was interested in investing in their businesses. A few just wanted the gossip. I ignored them all and focused on my work. I had a presentation for Microsoft the next day, a rebranding proposal that would net my company 7 figures if approved. While my family scrambled to figure out how to pay their bills, I was building my empire even larger. 3 days later, Tiffany showed up at my door. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was unwashed, her designer clothes replaced with jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt. She'd clearly been crying. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice small. I let her in, more out of curiosity than compassion. She looked around my apartment, really seeing it for the first time. The original artwork on the walls, the custom furniture, the subtle signs of wealth that didn't scream for attention but whispered quality to those who knew what to look for. "This is beautiful," she said softly. "I never knew." "Because you never asked?" I replied. "You never once asked about my life, my work, my success. You just assumed I was a failure because I didn't broadcast my wealth like a peacock showing its feathers." She sat down on my couch, her shoulders slumping. "Michael left me," she said. "When he found out the money was gone, that the wedding would have to be canceled, that we couldn't afford the apartment, he said he couldn't marry someone from a family of frauds." I felt a tiny pang of sympathy but pushed it down. "I'm sorry you're hurting," I said, "but Michael just showed you who he really was. He was only interested in the money and status. In a way, I did you a favor." "How can you be so calm?" she asked. "I destroyed our relationship and you're just fine with it?" "I mourned our relationship years ago," I told her. "Every time you made me feel small, every time you laughed at my career, every time you treated me like a charity case while spending my money, you killed a piece of what we had. The engagement party was just the funeral." She started crying again. "Is there any way, any chance you could help? Not all of it, just enough to keep the apartment for a few months while I figure things out?" "No," I said simply. "Not because I can't afford it, but because you need to learn what you tried to teach me. Independence, self-reliance, the value of working for what you have." "But I don't know how," she admitted. "I've never had to work. Mom and Dad paid for everything, then you did, though I didn't know it. I don't have any skills." "Then develop some," I suggested. "You organize that engagement party down to the smallest detail. Maybe event planning is your calling, or maybe you'll discover something else. But you'll never know if someone keeps catching you every time you fall." She left an hour later, defeated but perhaps with a tiny seed of determination planted. I didn't know if she'd water it or let it die, but it was her choice to make. Over the next few weeks, the family's situation became increasingly desperate. Uncle Arthur's development project went into foreclosure. Brenda's sustainable fashion brand collapsed without my funding. Richard's hedge fund faced an investor revolt when they discovered he'd been living off his wife's family money rather than his supposed financial acumen. Aunt Estelle had to sell her jewelry to pay for basic expenses. Some of them tried to reconcile. Uncle Arthur sent a long letter apologizing for years of condescension, though it was clearly written by a lawyer. Brenda attempted to visit, but couldn't get past the doorman I'd instructed to turn her away. Richard tried to shame me on social media, but that backfired spectacularly when people who'd witnessed the engagement party debacle shared their own recordings and observations. The only one who didn't reach out was Aunt Estelle. Instead, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd taken a job at Nordstrom, her first real job in 30 years. She was apparently good at it, using her eye for fashion and genuine warmth when not poisoned by snobbery to become one of their top salespeople within a month. 2 months after the engagement party, I received an unexpected call from Michael. He wanted to meet, claiming he had information I needed to know. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop in Manhattan. He looked rough. The perfect hair was unkempt, the designer clothes replaced with off-the-rack basics. He fidgeted with his coffee cup, clearly uncomfortable. "I wanted to apologize," he began. "Not for leaving Tiffany, but for how I treated you. And to warn you." "Warn me about what?" "Your family is planning to contest your ownership of the properties," he said. "They've pooled what little money they have left to hire a lawyer. They're claiming undue influence, that you manipulated them into signing over properties when they were vulnerable." I laughed. "Let them try. Every transaction was above board, documented, and done through proper legal channels. They came to me desperate for money and signed whatever was necessary to get it. I know, he said, but they're desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. Just be careful. I studied him for a moment. Why are you telling me this? He shrugged. Maybe because I finally understand what it's like to be on the outside looking in. They're treating me the same way they treated you, now that I'm not useful to them anymore. A week later, I was served with legal papers. The family was indeed contesting the property ownership, claiming I'd taken advantage of them during times of financial distress. It was almost amusing, considering they'd been in financial distress because of their own overspending and poor decisions. My lawyer, one of the best in New York, reviewed the case and laughed. They don't have a leg to stand on, she assured me. Every contract was reviewed by their own lawyers at the time. You actually gave them better terms than any bank would have. This is just a nuisance suit hoping you'll settle to make it go away. No settlement, I said firmly. I want this to go to court. I want everything on the record. The court date was set for 3 months out. During that time, my family's situation continued to deteriorate. Tiffany was evicted from her apartment and had to move back in with our parents, who were themselves struggling after I'd stopped paying their mortgage. Brenda and Richard divorced, fighting bitterly over what few assets remained. Uncle Arthur declared personal bankruptcy. When the court date arrived, I dressed carefully in a simple but impeccably tailored suit. My family showed up looking like shadows of their former selves, their designer clothes sold, their confidence shattered. The judge, an elderly woman with sharp eyes, listened to both sides present their cases. My family's lawyer painted me as a predator who'd taken advantage of relatives in distress. My lawyer systematically destroyed every argument with documentation, contracts, and evidence of my family's pattern of behavior. The most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source. Patricia, my wealth manager, had kept recordings of all our conversations regarding the family payments, as was standard practice for the bank. In recording after recording, you could hear me expressing concern about enabling my family's spending habits, wondering if I should attach conditions to the money, worrying that they were becoming too dependent. My client, my lawyer said, repeatedly expressed desire to help her family become financially independent. She offered to pay for financial counseling, investment education, and career coaching. All offers were refused. The family wanted money, not education. When it was my turn to testify, I told the truth. All of it. The years of mockery, the public humiliation, the constant requests for money coupled with constant insults about my supposed poverty. I produced text messages, emails, and voicemails showing the pattern of behavior. The most damaging piece of evidence was a video from the engagement party. One of the guests had recorded the entire confrontation and posted it on social media. The judge watched my family publicly humiliate me for being financially dependent while they were, in fact, completely dependent on me. This is one of the most clear-cut cases I've ever seen, the judge said at the end. The plaintiff's claim of undue influence is not only unsupported but contradicted by overwhelming evidence. The defendant went above and beyond to help her family, who responded with cruelty and ingratitude. All claims are dismissed with prejudice, and the plaintiffs are ordered to pay the defendant's legal fees. My family sat in stunned silence as the judgment was read. Tiffany was crying quietly. Uncle Arthur's face was purple with rage. Brenda looked like she might faint. As we left the courthouse, Aunt Estelle approached me. She looked different, healthier somehow, despite the obvious financial struggles. I didn't want to be part of the lawsuit, she said quietly, but Arthur insisted. I'm sorry, Bonnie, for everything. I looked at her for a long moment. I heard you're doing well at Nordstrom. She smiled slightly. I am. It's hard work, but it's honest work. For the first time in my life, I'm earning my own money. It's not much, but it's mine. Good for you, I said, and meant it. Could we maybe have coffee sometime? She asked hesitantly. Not to ask for anything, just to talk, to maybe start over. I considered it. Of all my family members, Estelle seemed to be the only one actually learning from the experience. Maybe, I said. Call me in a few months. We'll see. As I walked away from the courthouse, I felt lighter than I had in years. The money I'd spent on my family over the years was gone, but it had bought me something valuable. My freedom. Freedom from their expectations, their judgments, their toxicity. 6 months later, my life had settled into a new rhythm. My company had expanded, taking on 3 new major clients. I'd bought another building in Queens, turning it into affordable housing for young artists and designers, remembering what it was like to struggle when starting out. Tiffany had indeed become an event planner, starting at the very bottom as an assistant at a small company. She was apparently good at it, according to mutual friends, though we hadn't spoken since the trial. Uncle Arthur had disappeared entirely. Rumor had it he'd moved to Florida to live with a friend. Brenda was working as a sales associate at a department store, ironically not far from where Aunt Estelle worked. Richard had left New York entirely, his reputation in finance destroyed. Aunt Estelle and I had met for coffee twice. The conversations were stilted and awkward, but she was trying. She'd apologized genuinely, not seeking forgiveness but offering it anyway. She was seeing a therapist, working through why she'd allowed wealth and status to poison her relationships. I wasn't ready to let her back into my life fully, but I appreciated the effort. One evening, as I sat in my apartment looking out at the Manhattan skyline, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The years of silent suffering, the moment of public humiliation that became my liberation, the chaos that followed. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, but something made me read it. "This is Tiffany. I know you don't want to hear from me, and I won't contact you again if you don't respond. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what it's like to work for something, to earn something, to value something because you created it yourself. I'm sorry it took losing everything to learn what you tried to teach us all along. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that the lesson wasn't wasted. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be." I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. Maybe someday I'd be ready to rebuild some kind of relationship with her. But not yet. Not until the scars had faded more. I poured myself a glass of wine, a good bottle that I'd bought simply because I enjoyed it, not to impress anyone or prove anything. As I sipped it, I thought about the price of maintaining my family's lifestyle all those years. It hadn't just been financial. It had been emotional, psychological, spiritual even. I'd paid in self-doubt, in swallowed pride, in countless moments of feeling small and worthless. But I'd also learned valuable lessons. I'd learned that true wealth isn't what you display but what you build. That family isn't always blood but sometimes the people who see your worth when you're still discovering it yourself. That the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you but building yourself up so high that their opinions become irrelevant. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Patricia from Chase. "Congratulations, Miss Blackwood. The Microsoft contract has been signed. The initial payment of $2.3 million will be transferred tomorrow." I smiled and raised my glass to the skyline, to new beginnings, to hard-learned lessons, to the price of silence finally being broken, and the sound of my own success ringing louder than their mockery ever had.